My name is Doris, and I am 54 years old. I still remember the day I held that cream-colored wedding invitation in my trembling hands. My son Marcus had not spoken to me in 3 years. 3 long, painful years of silence. And suddenly, here was this elegant card inviting me to his wedding. My heart swelled with hope, but something felt wrong. Why now? Why after all this time? Before I begin my story, let me know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Now let me take you back to understand why a simple wedding invitation made my heart ache with both love and suspicion. 25 years ago, I married Harold, a man whose charm could light up any room. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. I fell hard and fast, and before I knew it, I was 25 years old, pregnant, and believing I had found my forever. Marcus came into this world on a rainy Tuesday morning in April. 7 pounds 4 ounces of pure perfection. When I held him for the first time, I made a silent promise that I would give him everything I never had: a stable home, unconditional love, a mother who would never leave. But Harold had other plans. When Marcus was just 2 years old, I discovered Harold had been seeing another woman. Her name was Patricia, a secretary at his office. I found the hotel receipts hidden in his jacket pocket, the perfume on his collar that was not mine, the late nights that turned into early mornings. The divorce was brutal. Harold did not fight for custody. He did not fight for anything except his freedom. He packed his bags, emptied our joint account, and left me with a toddler and a mountain of debt he had accumulated without my knowledge. I remember sitting on the floor of our tiny one-bedroom apartment that first night alone, Marcus sleeping in my arms, wondering how I was going to survive. The rent was due in 2 weeks, the refrigerator was nearly empty, and I had exactly $47 to my name, but I refused to break. I found 2 jobs. During the day, I worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm downtown. The pay was modest, but it was steady. At night, 3 times a week, I waitressed at a diner called Rosie's on 5th Street. The tips were decent, and the owner let me take home leftover food. My daily routine became a carefully choreographed dance of survival. I woke up at 5 in the morning before the sun had even thought about rising. I would prepare Marcus's breakfast, usually oatmeal with sliced bananas, because it was cheap and filling. Then I would get him dressed, drop him off at Mrs. Patterson's house down the street. She watched him for a reduced rate because she knew I was struggling. I worked at the accounting firm from 8 until 5. Then I would pick up Marcus, feed him dinner, help him with his homework as he got older, read him a bedtime story, and then head to the diner for my evening shift. I would not get home until almost midnight, my feet aching, my back screaming. But I would always check on Marcus before collapsing into bed. There were nights I cried in the bathroom with the door locked, the shower running to mask the sound. I did not want Marcus to hear his mother falling apart. He was too young to carry that burden. So I saved my tears for when he was asleep, and I put on a brave face every morning. I sacrificed everything for that boy. I skipped lunches to save money for his school supplies. I wore the same 3 outfits to work for years because new clothes for me meant less money for Marcus's needs. When he wanted to play basketball in middle school, I sold my wedding ring, the only piece of jewelry I had left, to pay for his registration fee and new sneakers. I never dated. Not once in all those years. Men would ask me out, nice men who might have made good partners, but I could not risk it. My focus was Marcus. My entire world revolved around making sure he had opportunities I never did. And for a long time it felt worth it. Marcus grew up smart and kind. He excelled in school, earning a partial scholarship to a good university. I was so proud the day he graduated high school. We stood outside the auditorium, him in his cap and gown, me in the nicest dress I owned, which I had bought second-hand for $12. He hugged me so tight that day. "Mom," he said, "when I make it big, I am going to buy you a house with a garden. You deserve it more than anyone." I believed him. With my whole heart, I believed him. The day Marcus graduated from college was one of the happiest of my life. I sat in the audience, tears streaming down my face, watching my baby boy walk across that stage. I had done it. Against all odds, I had raised a successful, educated young man. In the photograph from that day, we are standing together, his arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning like fools. I kept that photo on my nightstand for years. It was proof that all the sacrifice had been worth something. After graduation, Marcus landed a job at a prestigious financial firm in the city. Entry level, but with potential for growth. He called me every day those first few months, telling me about his co-workers, his projects, the fancy coffee machine in the break room. But slowly things began to shift. The daily calls became every other day, then twice a week, then once a week if I was lucky. I told myself it was normal. He was a young professional now building his career. Of course he was busy. Of course he did not have time to chat with his mother every day. But there was something else that changed too. Something in his voice. When he said Mom, it did not sound the same anymore. The warmth was fading, replaced by something I could not quite name. Distance, maybe. Or embarrassment. I chose to ignore it. I was good at ignoring things I did not want to see. I had spent years pretending I was not exhausted, pretending I was not lonely, pretending everything was fine. I could pretend a little longer. The first crack in my relationship with Marcus appeared when Harold resurfaced. After more than 20 years of complete absence, my ex-husband suddenly decided he wanted to be a father again. I found out through social media, of all places. One of my co-workers showed me a photograph she had seen on Marcus's page. There he was, my son standing next to Harold, at what looked like a golf course, both of them smiling like old friends. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Marcus had never mentioned reconnecting with his father. Not a word. I had to find out through a stranger showing me a picture on her phone during lunch break. When I called Marcus that evening, trying to keep my voice steady, he was dismissive. Oh, that. Yeah, Dad reached out a few months ago. We have been catching up. A few months. He had been seeing Harold for months and never told me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him that Dad was the man who abandoned us, who left his 2-year-old son without a second thought, who never paid a dime in child support, who never called on birthdays or holidays. But I did not. I swallowed my hurt and said, "That is nice, sweetheart. I'm glad you two are connecting." I do not know why I said that. Maybe I thought being supportive would bring Marcus closer to me. Maybe I was just too tired to fight. What I did not know then was that Harold had reinvented himself. He had moved to California, started a business, married again, divorced again, and somehow emerged as a successful entrepreneur. The man who could not be bothered to send his son a birthday card for 2 decades was now playing the role of doting father, complete with golf outings and expensive dinners. And Marcus was eating it up. A few months after the golf course photo, Marcus called to tell me he had a girlfriend. Her name was Priscilla Whitmore. Even the name sounded expensive. She is amazing, Mom. Smart, beautiful, ambitious. Her family owns a chain of luxury hotels. You would love her. I was happy for him, genuinely happy. My son deserved love, deserved happiness, but something in the way he described her family, the emphasis on their wealth and status, made me uneasy. Marcus suggested we meet through video call first. Priscilla was too busy to travel apparently, and Marcus thought it would be easier this way. Easier for whom, I wondered. The video call was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon. I cleaned my small apartment until it sparkled. I put on my nicest blouse. I even bought fresh flowers to put in a vase behind me, hoping to make my living room look more presentable. When the call connected, I saw Priscilla for the first time. She was beautiful, I had to admit. Perfectly styled blonde hair, flawless makeup, designer clothes. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. But her eyes, there was something cold in her eyes. "So you are Marcus's mother," she said, looking at me like she was examining a piece of furniture she was considering purchasing. "He has told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, trying to sound cheerful. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "He mentioned you work at a restaurant. I am a bookkeeper, actually. I waitress part-time on the side." I saw her exchange a quick glance with Marcus, the kind of glance that says something without words. "And you live alone in that apartment?" "Yes, it is small but comfortable." I have lived here for almost 15 years now. How quaint. The way she said that word. Quaint. Like my life was some amusing curiosity, a relic from another era. Marcus sat beside her, saying almost nothing. When I tried to ask him about his job, Priscilla answered for him. When I mentioned a funny story from his childhood, he looked uncomfortable, almost pained. After the call ended, I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by my second-hand furniture and my $12 flowers, and I felt something I had never felt before. I felt like my son was ashamed of me. A month later, Marcus invited me to meet Priscilla's family in person. They were hosting a dinner at their home, and Marcus wanted me there. I was nervous for weeks beforehand. I spent what little savings I had on a new dress, nothing fancy, just a simple navy blue dress that the saleswoman assured me was elegant and appropriate. I had my hair done at a salon for the first time in years. I even bought a gift for the Whitmores, a nice bottle of wine that the store clerk recommended. Nothing could have prepared me for that evening. The Whitmore estate was not a house. It was a mansion. Iron gates, circular driveway, manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than my annual salary. A uniformed man took my car, and I walked up the stone steps, feeling like an imposter. Gloria Whitmore greeted me at the door. She was an elegant woman in her early 60s, dripping with diamonds and designer everything. She looked at me the way one might look at something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of their shoe. "You must be Doris." She did not offer her hand. "Do come in." The dinner was excruciating. Richard Whitmore, Priscilla's father, barely acknowledged my existence. He spoke to Marcus about business, about investments, about their upcoming trip to the Maldives. I sat there like a ghost, invisible and unwanted. When Gloria finally addressed me directly, it was worse than being ignored. "So, Doris," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "Marcus tells us you are a bookkeeper. How? Interesting. I imagine that must be very fulfilling work." "It pays the bills," I said, trying to smile. She laughed, a tinkling sound that somehow felt like an insult. "Yes, I suppose that is what matters for some people." Priscilla smirked into her wineglass. Marcus stared at his plate, his face red, saying nothing. He did not defend me, not once. On the drive home, I replayed the evening in my mind. The looks, the comments, the way my son sat there embarrassed by my presence, ashamed of the woman who had given him everything. I cried the entire way home. After that dinner, Marcus began to disappear from my life. His calls became shorter, more infrequent. When I tried to visit, he always had an excuse. Work was busy. Priscilla needed him. Something always came up. I sent text messages that went unanswered for days. I left voicemails that were never returned. I started to feel like I was chasing someone who did not want to be caught. The last time I spoke to Marcus before the 3-year silence, he sounded irritated. "Mum, I am really busy. Priscilla and I have a lot going on. I will call you when I can." He never called. 3 months passed, then 6, then a year, then 2. I spent countless nights wondering what I had done wrong. Had I not loved him enough? Had I loved him too much? Was it something I said at that dinner? Something I wore? I drove myself crazy trying to understand, but the truth was simpler and crueler than any explanation I could imagine. My son had decided I was not good enough, not rich enough, not polished enough, not worthy of being part of his new glamorous life, and there was nothing I could do about it. The engagement announcement came through social media, just like everything else. One of my co-workers showed me the photo on her phone during our lunch break. Marcus on one knee in front of the Eiffel Tower, presenting a ring to Priscilla, who was crying tears of joy. The caption read, "She said yes." My heart stopped. My son was engaged. My only child was getting married. And I had found out the same way strangers found out through a photograph on the internet. I excused myself from the break room and locked myself in the bathroom. I sat on the closed toilet lid and cried silently, my hand pressed over my mouth to muffle the sobs. When I finally composed myself enough to leave work, I called Marcus. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, same result. I texted him trying to sound happy despite my breaking heart. "Congratulations, sweetheart. I am so happy for you. Please call me when you can. I love you." He called back 2 days later. Thanks, Mum. His voice was flat distant. Why did not you tell me I tried to keep the hurt out of my voice? I would have loved to hear it from you. It was a private moment, just family. There it was, that word, family. I am your family, Marcus. I am your mother. He sighed like I was being difficult. Mom, please, do not make this about you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to ask him how he could possibly think I was not his family after everything I had sacrificed for him. But I did not. I congratulated him again and hung up the phone. The engagement party was held at the Whitmore estate. I was not invited. I found out about it through the photos posted online. There was Marcus surrounded by wealthy strangers, laughing and celebrating. There was Harold standing right beside him, arm around his shoulder, beaming like a proud father. Harold, the man who had abandoned us. The man who had never changed a diaper, never attended a school play, never paid for a single meal. He was at my son's engagement party, and I was not. I spent that night looking through old photo albums. Marcus as a baby, taking his first steps in our cramped apartment. Marcus at 5, proudly showing me the drawing he made at school. Marcus at 10, hugging me tight after I surprised him with a birthday cake I had baked myself. Where had that boy gone? A few weeks after the engagement party, I ran into Priscilla and Gloria Whitmore at a department store. I was shopping for a new blouse, something affordable for work. They were in the designer section, surrounded by shopping bags that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I considered walking away, pretending I had not seen them, but something in me wanted to try. Maybe if I reached out, showed them I was not the enemy, things could improve. Gloria, Priscilla. I approached them with a smile. What a coincidence running into you here. Gloria's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, annoyance, barely concealed disdain. Doris. She did not return my smile. How unexpected. Priscilla barely glanced at me before turning back to the rack of silk blouses. I congratulated them on the engagement, asked about wedding plans, tried to make polite conversation. Gloria responded with monosyllables, clearly waiting for me to leave. Then, as I was turning to go, I heard Priscilla whisper to her mother. She was not trying to be quiet. I cannot believe Marcus comes from that. She is so ordinary. Gloria laughed softly. Money cannot buy class, dear. Some people are just born to serve, and some are born to be served. I froze. They saw that I had heard. Neither of them apologized or looked embarrassed. If anything, Priscilla seemed pleased. I walked out of the store with as much dignity as I could muster. I made it to my car before I broke down. I sat in that parking lot and cried for over an hour, my body shaking with sobs I could not control. This was what they thought of me. This was what my son had chosen over his own mother. Then came the phone call from Harold. It had been over 20 years since I had heard his voice, but I recognized it immediately. That smooth, confident tone that used to make me feel safe and now made my skin crawl. Doris, it has been a long time. What do you want, Harold? He got straight to the point. The wedding is coming up. The Whitmores are very particular about image. I think it would be best if you, to low profile. Excuse me, look. I know you did your best raising Marcus, but let us be honest, you do not exactly fit in with that crowd. Just come sit quietly and do not embarrass our son. Our son. I could feel my blood pressure rising. You left when he was 2. You do not get to call him our son. Harold sighed like I was being unreasonable. I'm just trying to help. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. I hung up without saying goodbye. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus finally called me directly. I was so hopeful when I saw his name on my phone. Maybe he wanted to reconnect. Maybe he realized how wrong he had been. Maybe he missed me. Mum, I need to talk to you about the wedding. Of course, sweetheart. What do you need? There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. The Whitmores have certain expectations. I need you to not make a scene. Wear something simple, not too flashy. And please do not mention anything about our old apartment or your jobs. Just blend in okay. I felt like I had been slapped. Marcus, I am your mother. I know, Mum. That is why I'm asking nicely. I do not want any drama. The line went dead. I sat alone in my dark apartment for hours that night, holding the photo of Marcus from his college graduation. The boy who had promised to buy me a house with a garden. The boy who had once been my whole world. That boy was gone. In his place was a stranger who called his mother wretched and wanted her to blend in like she was something to be ashamed of. The phone call from Linda changed everything. Linda had been my best friend since high school. We had been through everything together. My divorce, her cancer scare, countless heartbreaks and triumphs. She was the one person I trusted completely. She worked as a wedding planner in the city, which meant she occasionally crossed paths with the elite social circles. That is how she heard about the Whitmores' plans. Doris, I need to tell you something. Her voice on the phone was serious, worried. You have to promise me you will stay calm. My stomach dropped. What is it? I was at a fitting today for another client, and Gloria Whitmore was there for Priscilla's final dress fitting. I overheard her talking to one of her friends. What did she say? Linda took a deep breath. She said they invited you to the wedding on purpose. It is part of a plan. What kind of plan? They are going to seat you at the worst table right next to the kitchen door. And during the reception, Harold is going to make a speech. He is going to thank, quote, the nanny who raised Marcus, unquote. Not his mother. The nanny. I felt the room spin. There is more. Linda continued, her voice tight with anger. Marcus apparently told Priscilla that he is going to, quote, disgrace the wretched woman so she never shows her face again, unquote. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. He said that my Marcus said that. I am so sorry, Doris. I had to tell you. You cannot walk into that. I do not remember much of what happened after I hung up. I know I sat in my chair for hours, unable to move. I know the sun set and rose again without me noticing. The wretched woman. My son called me the wretched woman. I thought about every sacrifice I had made, every meal I skipped so he could eat, every night I worked until midnight so he could have new school clothes, every dream I gave up so he could have a future. And this was how he repaid me. I pulled out the old photo albums again. Marcus at his first birthday, face covered in cake. Marcus learning to ride a bike, me running beside him. Marcus at his high school graduation, hugging me with tears in his eyes. When did he stop loving me? Was it gradual like water wearing away its stone? Or was it sudden the moment he stepped into the Whitmores' glittering world and decided I did not belong? I cried that night like I had not cried since Harold left. Deep body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. I cried for the son I had lost. I cried for the mother I had been. I cried for all the years I had given to someone who now wanted to publicly humiliate me. When I finally stopped crying, something in me had shifted. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my face blotchy, my hair a mess. I looked like a woman who had been defeated. But then I looked deeper. I saw the woman who had survived abandonment, the woman who had worked 2 jobs for 20 years, the woman who had never given up, never stopped fighting, never let her circumstances define her. I was not wretched. I was not an embarrassment, and I would not let them treat me like one. That night I made a decision. I would go to that wedding, but not to be humiliated. I would go to show them exactly who Doris really was. There is something I have not told you yet. Something I have kept secret for 2 years. My Aunt Marjorie passed away 26 months ago. She was my mother's older sister, a quiet woman who had never married, never had children. She lived alone in a modest house in Vermont, and I visited her a few times a year when I could afford the trip. I loved Aunt Marjorie. She was eccentric and independent, always reading thick books about finance and economics. When I was young, she used to tell me that the best revenge against a hard life was living well. I never quite understood what she meant, until I read her will. Aunt Marjorie, it turned out, had not been living modestly by necessity. She had been living modestly by choice. For 40 years, she had quietly invested in real estate, buying small properties, renovating them, renting them out. She had an eye for undervalued gems and the patience to watch them appreciate. When her lawyer read the will, I almost fell out of my chair. She left me everything. $12 million in investments and cash, 3 commercial properties in growing neighborhoods, and a letter. Dear Doris, she wrote, I watched you sacrifice everything for your son. You never asked anyone for help. You never complained. You just put your head down and did what needed to be done. You deserve this more than anyone I know. Use it to live the life you deserve. Your loving Aunt Marjorie. $12 million. I could not process it. I had spent so many years counting pennies, worrying about rent, denying myself the smallest luxuries. And now I was wealthy beyond anything I had ever imagined. I decided to keep it secret. I was not sure why at first. Maybe I wanted to wait until Marcus and I were on better terms to share the news. Maybe I wanted to make sure it was real before I believed it. Maybe I just needed time to adjust. Whatever the reason, I told no one except Linda, not Marcus, not Harold, not a soul. And then I met Edward Callahan. Edward was Aunt Marjorie's financial advisor. He had helped her build her fortune over the decades, and he had been named as the executor of her estate. When I met him to discuss the inheritance, I expected a stuffy old banker in a grey suit. Instead, I found a kind-eyed man of 60, with silver hair and a warm smile. He had been widowed 5 years earlier and had thrown himself into his work to cope with the grief. He ran one of the largest investment firms in the country, but you would never know it from talking to him. He was humble, genuine, and surprisingly funny. Over the months of managing my inheritance, Edward and I grew close. What started as professional meetings turned into dinners, then long conversations about life and loss and hope. He told me about his late wife, about his regrets, about his dreams for whatever years he had left. I told him about Marcus, about Harold, about the loneliness that had been my constant companion. Edward saw me. Not the bookkeeper, not the single mother, not the ordinary woman the Whitmores sneered at. He saw Doris. Just Doris, and he loved what he saw. 6 months before Marcus's wedding, Edward proposed to me on a quiet beach at sunset. No fanfare, no audience, just the two of us and the sound of waves. Doris, he said, I have had success, and I have had money, but I have never been happier than when I am with you. Will you marry me? I said yes. We decided to keep our engagement private for a while. I still harbored hope that I could reconcile with Marcus, that I could introduce Edward to my son under happy circumstances. But as the months passed and Marcus's silence continued, that hope began to fade. After Linda told me about the Whitmores' plan, I knew what I had to do. I told Edward everything. The invitation, the plan to humiliate me, the seating by the kitchen, the speech calling me a nanny, the words my son had used to describe me. Edward listened in silence. When I finished, his face was red with controlled fury. They want to humiliate you. My Doris. They have no idea who they are dealing with. I shook my head. I do not want to use your money to prove anything. That is not who I am. This is not about money, Edward said firmly. This is about dignity. Your dignity. They think they can crush you because they believe you are powerless. Show them you are not. I thought about it for a long time. I had never been one for grand gestures. I had spent my whole life trying to be invisible, trying not to take up too much space, trying not to be a burden. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I had spent so long being small that I had forgotten I was allowed to be big. I decided to go to that wedding, but I would go on my terms. Edward helped me plan everything. We rented a Rolls-Royce Ghost, sleek and black and impossibly elegant. We arranged for professional bodyguards, not because I needed protection, but because the image would make a statement. I went to the finest boutique in the city and chose a gown, emerald green silk, that made me feel like a queen. From Aunt Marjorie's collection, I selected diamond jewelry that caught the light like captured stars. I had my hair styled at an exclusive salon, my makeup done by a professional artist. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror and barely recognized myself. I was not the tired woman in the second-hand dress anymore. I was not the embarrassment to be hidden by the kitchen door. I was Doris, and I was magnificent. The wedding was held at the Whitmore family's country estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a private lake. The guest list read like a who's who of society business tycoons and politicians and old money families. They were expecting a quiet, shabby woman who would slink to her assigned seat and disappear into the background. They were about to be very surprised. Our convoy arrived just as the ceremony was about to begin. The Rolls-Royce Ghost pulled up to the entrance first, followed by 2 black Mercedes carrying Edward and the security team. Every head turned. The valet rushed forward, unsure how to handle the unexpected arrival. One of our bodyguards opened my door with practiced precision. I stepped out. The emerald gown cascaded around me like liquid jewels. Diamonds glittered at my throat and ears. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist that had taken hours to perfect. For a moment there was complete silence. Then the whispers started. "Who is that? She is stunning. Is that Edward Callahan?" The Edward Callahan. Edward emerged from the second car and walked to my side. He was impeccable in a custom-tailored suit, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. He offered me his arm, and together we walked toward the ceremony area. Gloria Whitmore spotted us first. I watched the color drain from her face. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand. Richard Whitmore's mouth actually fell open. The man who had barely acknowledged my existence at his dinner table now stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Priscilla grabbed Marcus's arm, her perfect composure cracking. "Marcus! Marcus, who is that?" I saved my gaze for last. Marcus stood at the altar in his wedding suit, his face frozen in an expression of pure shock. His eyes moved from the Rolls-Royce to the bodyguards to Edward to me. Back to me. He could not seem to look away. I smiled serenely and continued walking. Harold intercepted us before we reached our seats. His face had gone from tanned to ashen in seconds. "Doris, what is this?" "Hello, Harold." I kept my voice pleasant conversational. "It has been a while, has it not?" "Oh, let me introduce you. This is my fiancé, Edward Callahan. You might have heard of him." Harold's mouth opened and closed several times. No sound came out. Edward extended his hand. "Harold, is it, Doris has told me about you?" He paused meaningfully. "All about you." Harold shook his hand weakly, clearly trying to process what was happening. Gloria Whitmore materialized beside us, having recovered some of her composure. "Mrs. Doris." We were not expecting such a grand entrance. I turned to her with a gracious smile. "Oh, Gloria, please call me Doris. After all, we are almost family, are we not? Although I must say your hospitality has left much to be desired." Gloria's mouth tightened into a thin line. She had no response. Richard Whitmore rushed over to shake Edward's hand. "Mr. Callahan, it is an honor. I had no idea you were acquainted with." With my fiancé, Edward's arm tightened around my waist. "Yes, Doris is the love of my life, the most gracious, hard-working, and dignified woman I have ever met. You are fortunate to have her as part of your family." Richard nodded vigorously, suddenly eager to agree with everything Edward said. Yes, of course. We are delighted, absolutely delighted." I watched the transformation with bitter amusement. These people who had treated me like dirt were now falling over themselves to be polite because a wealthy man had vouched for my worth. But I was not finished yet. The ceremony had been delayed by our arrival, and now guests were murmuring, waiting to see what would happen next. I walked toward Marcus, who stood frozen at the altar like a statue. His face was unreadable. Shock, certainly. Fear, perhaps. And something else. Something that might have been shame. "Marcus." I stopped a few feet away from him. "Mom, I do not understand." "What do you not understand, Marcus?" "That your mother is not the wretched woman you thought she was." He flinched as if I had slapped him. "How? How did you—" "I know everything. The plan to humiliate me. The seating by the kitchen. Harold's speech about the nanny who raised you. Everything." The color drained from his face. "Mom, I can explain." I held up my hand. "There is nothing to explain. You made your choice. You chose to be ashamed of the woman who gave everything for you." "That is not—" "I did not mean—" His voice cracked. "Do you remember what you promised me when you graduated college?" I asked quietly. "You said you would buy me a house with a garden. You said I deserved it more than anyone." Tears were forming in his eyes now. "I remember." "I did not need your house, Marcus. I never needed your money. I just needed you to love me. I just needed you to not be ashamed of where you came from." "Mom." He took a step toward me. "I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong." But even as the words left his lips, something was happening. His face had gone from pale to grey. His breathing became shallow. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. And then his knees buckled. Marcus collapsed right there at the altar, his body crumpling like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Screams erupted. Priscilla shrieked. Guests rushed forward. Someone called for a doctor. In the chaos, I stood perfectly still. Part of me wanted to run to him, to hold him, to make sure he was okay. He was still my son. He would always be my son. But another part of me recognized this moment for what it was. The weight of his guilt, the shock of seeing his carefully constructed lie collapse around him, had literally brought him to his knees. A doctor who was among the guests examined Marcus and announced he had fainted. Stress shock, nothing life-threatening. He was carried to a room in the estate to recover. The wedding was in chaos. I looked around at the stunned faces. The Whitmores humiliated. Harold speechless for the first time in his life. The guests whispering and pointing not at me, but at the family who had tried to destroy me. Edward touched my elbow. "Do you want to leave?" "Not yet." I walked to the center of the ceremony area, where moments ago my son had stood ready to be married. The guests fell silent, watching. "I did not come here to ruin anyone's wedding," I said, my voice carrying across the manicured lawn. "I came here to show my son and everyone else that a mother's worth is not measured by her bank account or her social status." I paused, letting the words sink in. I worked 2 jobs for 20 years to raise that boy. I went hungry so he could eat. I sold my wedding ring so he could play basketball. I gave up everything so he could have a future. And this is how I was to be repaid. Seated by the kitchen, mocked in a speech, disgraced in front of strangers. I turned to look at Gloria and Richard Whitmore, who seemed to be trying to disappear into the crowd. "You taught him to be ashamed of where he came from, but where he came from is what made him who he is. Without me, there would be no Marcus for you to adopt into your family." I found Harold in this crowd, his face red with embarrassment. "And you abandoned us 27 years ago. You never paid child support. You never called on birthdays. You never showed up to a single school event. And now you are going to stand up and call me a nanny. You do not have the right to speak my name." Finally, I addressed everyone. "I forgive my son, but I will not forget. And I will never allow anyone to treat me as less than I deserve." I took Edward's arm. We walked back to the Rolls-Royce with our heads held high. The bodyguards fell into step behind us. As we drove away from the Whitmore estate, I did not look back. The days after the wedding were a strange mix of relief and grief. I had won. Everyone agreed I had won. The story spread through society circles like wildfire. The bookkeeper, who turned out to be a secret millionaire. The mother who stood up to the family that tried to humiliate her. I received messages from people I had never met, expressing admiration and support. But I did not feel victorious. I felt empty, because at the end of the day, I had still lost my son. The confrontation had been necessary, but it did not undo the betrayal. It did not erase the words he had used to describe me. It did not restore the boy I had raised. Edward was a constant source of comfort. He did not try to fix things or offer empty platitudes. He simply stayed by my side, holding my hand through the long nights, listening when I needed to talk, being silent when I needed quiet. Linda visited often too. We would sit on my new porch, the one attached to the beautiful house Edward and I had moved into together, and we would talk for hours about life, about healing, about what comes next. The wedding did eventually take place 3 weeks later than planned. It was a much smaller affair, I heard. Many of the original guests declined to attend after the scandal. The Whitmore's reputation had taken a significant hit. I was not invited to the rescheduled ceremony. I did not expect to be. 3 months passed before Marcus called. I was sitting in the garden when my phone rang. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Mum." His voice was small, uncertain. "It is me." "I know. Can we talk?" I did not respond immediately. A hummingbird was hovering near the roses Edward had planted for me. I watched it dip and weave, so small and fragile and determined. "Yes," I finally said. "We can talk." He came to my house the next day. When he saw where I lived now, his eyes widened, but he did not comment. I think he understood that material things were not the point. We sat in the garden, two people who had once been everything to each other, now trying to find their way back. "Mum, I am so sorry." Tears streamed down his face as he spoke. "I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything." "Tell me why," I said quietly. "I need to understand why." And he did. He told me about the pressure he had felt to fit in with Priscilla's world, the subtle and not so subtle comments about his background, the way Harold had swooped in, offering him an identity he thought he wanted, the way the Whitmores made him feel like he was finally somebody as long as he erased where he came from. "I thought I needed to become someone else to be worthy," he said. "I thought my past was holding me back. I thought you were holding me back. And now I know the truth." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "The Whitmores do not love me. They love the version of me that makes them look good. Priscilla wants a trophy husband, not a partner. And Dad disappeared again the minute the scandal hit. He has not returned my calls in weeks." I was not surprised. Harold was nothing if not consistent in his disappearances. "The only person who ever loved me for me was you, Mum." Marcus's voice broke, and I threw it away. "I threw you away." I reached out and took his hand. It was the first time we had touched in over 3 years. "I love you, Marcus. I have always loved you and I always will. You are my son and nothing will ever change that." His shoulders shook with sobs. "But what you did," I continued, "it hurt me in ways I cannot describe. I spent 20 years sacrificing everything for you. And to find out you planned to publicly humiliate me, to call me wretched, to treat me like something to be ashamed of, that pain does not disappear overnight." "I know, I'm so sorry. I forgive you. But forgiveness does not mean everything goes back to the way it was. Trust takes time to rebuild. Love is patient, but it is not blind." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I understand. I will do whatever it takes, however long it takes." We sat together in the garden for a long time, after that not saying much. The hummingbird returned, flitting from flower to flower. The afternoon sun warmed our faces. It was a beginning, not an ending, just a fragile, hopeful beginning. Edward and I got married in a small ceremony last spring. Just Linda, a few close friends, and the officiant. No grand estate, no society guests, no drama. Just two people promising to spend their remaining years loving each other. Marcus was there. It was awkward at first. He did not know how to act around Edward, and Edward was understandably protective of me. But they found common ground, eventually bonding over their shared love of baseball and bad puns. We are still rebuilding. Some days are better than others. Marcus and Priscilla are working through their issues, though I am not sure their marriage will survive. That is for them to figure out. I have learned that I cannot save my son from his own choices. I can only love him and be here when he needs me. Harold has not reached out again. I doubt he ever will. Some people are simply incapable of being what others need them to be. I have made peace with that. And the Whitmores. They have faded from my life entirely. Gloria apparently tells people that the wedding scandal was a misunderstanding, that she had always respected me. I do not care what she tells people. Her opinion of me stopped mattering the day I stepped out of that Rolls-Royce. I learned so much from this experience. I learned that your worth is not determined by how others see you. It is determined by how you see yourself. For too many years, I accepted the role of the invisible woman, the struggling single mother, the person who did not deserve nice things or grand gestures. I let other people's opinions define me. Never again. I learned that sometimes the people who should love you the most can hurt you the deepest. But that does not mean you are unworthy of love. It means you need to choose more carefully who you allow into your heart. I learned that standing up for yourself is not about revenge. It is about dignity. It is about saying, I deserve better than this. Not with anger, not with cruelty, just with quiet, unshakable confidence. And I learned that forgiveness is not weakness. It is freedom. When you forgive, you free yourself from the chains of anger and bitterness. You do not forgive for the other person. You forgive for yourself. My son and I are still on that journey. Some conversations are hard. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. But I have hope, because real love, the kind worth having, is patient, and I am willing to wait. If you are watching this and feeling like you are not enough, feeling like the world has forgotten you, feeling like you do not matter, I want you to know something. Your story is not over. The best chapter might just be waiting to be written, and sometimes the Rolls-Royce ghost was inside you all along. You just need to let it shine. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who should have loved you? Have you ever had to reclaim your dignity from people who tried to take it from you? I would love to hear your story. Please share it in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like so others can find it too. And if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you strength. I wish you dignity. I wish you the courage to know your worth, even when the world tries to make you forget it. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, you are worthy. You have always been worthy.